3D printing is amazing, but let's be honest. Sometimes even a really good print still looks like a plastic part. And that's not always a bad thing, but sometimes I want something to feel just a little bit more finished. You know, something that looks a little less like it came straight off the printer and more like a final product. So today, I'm testing whether a laser cutter can make 3D printing even better. I'm using the WeCreat Vision laser cutter and engraver to add things like wood, acrylic, and engraving to a few simple 3D printed projects. And by the end, I want to answer one question. Can a laser cutter actually take 3D prints to the next level? Now, the idea here isn't to replace 3D printing. The 3D printer is doing what it does best. It's making the custom parts and all the functional pieces. But a laser cutter is really good at things that 3D printers don't always do well, and hopefully a more premium looking final result. So I found a few projects online and tried combining both tools to see if it actually improves the finished product, or if I'm just overcomplicating everything with just another machine, which to be fair, does sound exactly something like I would do. The laser cutter I'm using today is the WeCreat Vision, which was provided by WeCreat. And I'll be honest, this thing is pretty interesting. It's got a built-in camera, autofocus, and an enclosed design, and it connects to their own proprietary software. Now, the software was pretty easy to use, and it's definitely a highlight of this machine. I've used machines that didn't have good software before, and it sucked. I also like that this machine has an included air pump to help with cutting and engraving. It does run a little bit loud, but not terribly loud. And one small thing I really like is that you can adjust the darkness of the engraving directly in the software, which you're gonna see here that maybe it was a bad idea for me to test. I will say this though, it is a huge machine once it's all raised up and set up. It's definitely takes up a lot of space. For the first project, I really wanted to start simple. So I found this really cool coaster holder over on MakerWorld that fits 92mm coasters. Now, let's actually make some coasters that go in this. I hopped over to Creative Fabrica and found some funny coffee quotes because if I'm gonna make some coasters, they might as well be funny and they might as well be good for coffee. Then I opened up the WeCreat software, made some basic 92mm circles, and then added the quotes on the inside of them. Now the plan here is to cut the coasters out of 3mm basswood and engrave the quotes directly onto the top. And honestly, I really like how these came out. The wood gives them a really nice handmade look, and the engraving is clean enough that it feels way more finished than if I had just tried to print the whole thing. Now, could you have 3D printed coasters? Of course. But for this type of project, the laser cut wood just looks better and is a little bit nicer to touch. I also wanted to try the same thing with some black acrylic and engraved another design into one of those. These came out with a totally different feel. The wood ones feel more warm and handmade, whereas the black acrylic ones feel a little bit cleaner and maybe a little bit more modern. So right away, this gave me a pretty good example of why these two machines work well together. Also, I have way more places to set my coffee in my shop, which is both helpful and probably dangerous because maybe I don't need that much coffee. And in case you're wondering, I have massive allergies right now, so if I sound a little nasally or funky, I apologize. So for this first project, I'd call this a win. This is a simple example, but it makes a lot of sense. The 3D printer makes the holder, the laser makes the coasters, and together, the project feels more finished than either one would have on its own. So yeah, for this, the laser definitely made the 3D printed project better. Next up is this desk organizer. And this one might be one of my favorite examples because a 3D printed desk organizer is already useful, but it still looks like a plastic tray. So the idea here was to print the main organizer and then use the laser cutter to make wooden inserts that drop into the bottom of it. I accidentally printed the organizer in Polymaker's HTPLA glass fiber. And I'm really glad I made that accident because I really like the way that this filament printed and it has a really nice matte look and the glass fiber definitely helps hide those layer lines a bit. So before even adding the wood, this print already looks really clean. Now same thing with the coasters, I used some more 3mm bass wood and I cut them over on the machine. And now that we have them cut out, let's go ahead and put them in. And I have to say, I really love the way that the color contrasts here. The matte black just looks so good with the nice warmer color of the wood. It really feels more premium with this like this together. The 3D printed part gives you all the structure and organization. You know, you get the compartments, the shape, and the custom layout, but the wood adds contrast and makes it feel more like something that belongs on a desk, instead of something that I just pulled off my build plate maybe like 5 minutes ago, way too soon before it even cooled off. I could also take this a step further and engrave labels into each insert, or even custom designs. So instead of just having random compartments, each section could have its own dedicated spot. You know, stuff, crap, and more crap. While I used basswood for this version, I think it looks really good, but I do think maybe a darker wood like walnut might even look better, or even if I just put some stain on this, which I don't think I've ever stained wood. Huh. Maybe I should do that in the future. So for the desk organizer, I think this is another win. The laser didn't really change how the organizer works, but it absolutely changed how it looks. For this next project, I wanted to try something a little bit similar, but in a way that felt more like a finished project as well. So I made some 3D printed cases with some wooden inlay tops. This is probably one of the better examples of combining a laser cutter with a 3D printer. Because cases are already a great use for 3D printing, you can print the exact size, the shape, everything that you want. You can add little compartments, add little details. You can make it fit whatever random thing you're trying to organize and find a home for. But a fully 3D printed case can still just look like a plastic box. So adding a wooden inlay to the top really changes the feel of it. The 3D printed part gives you the structure. The laser cut wood gives it that finished surface. And because the laser can engrave wood, you can add a logo, text, a pattern, whatever design you want, like this one right here. So for this one, I found a cool keepsake box design that incorporates the wood as the lid. And as I recently watched Hot Tub Time Machine, I really hope you get this reference. This is the kind of project that makes me want to think about all the possibilities. You can make a nozzle case, an SD card case, camera battery case, a memory box, a gift box, or even product packaging if you're trying to sell something. And that's what's really cool about this, is the fact that you can use your 3D printer to make everything, but you can take it to that next level with the laser cutter. Next up, I was trying something a little bit different. I designed these little circular luggage tags when I was about to go on vacation, but I didn't finish this project before I left, so here we are with nothing done. What I did here was the 3D printer made the frame, and I used the laser cutter to cut out the circles that went inside. Now for this, the wood is actually encapsulated within the 3D print. And the way I did that was I let the printer get to a certain point, I added a pause, and then I stuck the wood inside, and the printer would print over on top of the wood. And what's really cool about this is that you could engrave anything you wanted on here, a name, a phone number, logo, or just a simple design. Hell, you could even put a QR code here that has your contact information in case your luggage gets lost. And because it's engraved, it also feels more permanent than a sticker or like a paper insert that like my luggage had for when I went on my vacation. Now, could I have just printed text onto a piece of plastic? I totally could have. But I think this just looks nicer, and I think this will be a little bit more durable. Now lastly, so far, most of these products have used the laser to cut or engrave a separate piece that gets added to the 3D print. But then I started wondering, can I engrave directly onto the 3D print itself? Engraving wood and acrylic is one thing, but engraving plastic is really different. The results can change a lot depending on the material, the color, the surface texture, and the laser settings. And also, a very important safety note here. Before you start throwing plastic under a laser, make sure you know what material you're working with. Some plastics are not safe to laser engrave, and you definitely don't want to engrave anything like PVC. For this test, I started with a few printed pieces and tried engraving a logo and some text directly onto the surface. At first, I wasn't really sure how well this was going to work, but surprisingly, it actually did mark the print. Now, I wouldn't say this is the best option for every project. If you need a really clean contrast, engraving into wood or acrylic is probably still gonna look better, but being able to engrave directly onto an already finished 3D print is pretty cool. Because with 3D printing, if you forget to add text or a logo, you have to go back into the model, make the changes, print the whole thing again. But with a laser, you can just add that detail afterward. And not only that, it's probably gonna look better as well. I tried engraving both sides on this battery holder here that I designed, and I think it actually turned out really good. I do like how clean and crisp the text is on both sides. I think this is really cool. This is definitely something I want to test more. WeCreat also sent over their 2-watt infrared laser, which is going to do a much better job of marking up prints. While the regular diode laser can do it, it's not ideal, especially a 20-watt. They don't have the highest detail at that point. But when you use the 2-watt infrared laser, you get significantly better detail. This turned out really clean. And now I also did a couple more tests. This was on the PLA, this is on PETG, and this turned out phenomenal. And of course I needed to put that on my film holder here. And same thing, another design idea. The black definitely did a lot better. The green did okay. These are both PETG, but they definitely marked quite well. And being able to mark your prints like this is really cool, and I can see this being very valuable and helpful, especially if you're selling prints on Etsy and you need to add some sort of customization. It's a really good way to do it. Can a laser cutter make 3D printing better? Honestly, yeah, but not because it replaces the 3D printer. That's probably the biggest thing that I learned from this. The 3D printer is still doing what it does best. It's making the custom shapes and the functional part, but the laser cutter adds to the details that the 3D printer doesn't always handle well, and it just gives it a more finished look. So no, I don't think every 3D printed project needs a laser cutter, but if you already like making functional prints and you want some of those prints to look more finished, more giftable, and more like actual products, combining a laser cutter with a 3D printer does make a lot of sense. Now, I'm looking around my shop wondering what else can I overcomplicate with 2 machines instead of 1? Which honestly, is probably how most of my projects start. So let me know what you think. Do you think a laser cutter makes sense alongside a 3D printer? Or does this just feel like another machine that would take over your desk? Because this one definitely will take a full desk by itself. And if you want to see more videos where I combine 3D printing and other maker tools, be sure to get subscribed. And before you go, definitely check out this video right here. Thanks for watching. This is Adam from the Rad Dad Print Lab, and I'll see you next time.